All right, ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'm going to go over how to convert a fraction to a percent. Whenever you're converting a fraction to a percent, it must be converted to a decimal. Once you have it converted to a decimal, then you can move the decimal point 2 places to the right. When you're moving that decimal 2 places to the right, it's the same as multiplying by 100. And remember, you don't want to forget to place that percent sign at the end of the number. So, whenever we're converting fractions into percentages, I want you to kind of think about it as calculating your grade on an assessment or an assignment. So, here we have some different grades that we're going to go ahead and convert to a percentage. So, looking at this first one, it has 35 over 50. So, the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and convert it to a decimal. So, whenever we're converting our fraction to a decimal, we want to take our numerator and place it in our dividend, which is 35. And 50 will be our divisor. Now, 50 cannot go into 35, so I'm going to put zeros here. And I want to keep the division alive, so I'm going to put a decimal and then a 0 here. Now, 50 can go into 350 7 times. 50 times 7 is exactly 350. So when we subtract, we get 0 for our remainder. Now, we are not done yet. This is just telling us that our answer is 7/10. We then want to convert this over into a percentage. To do that, we need to move the decimal 2 times to the right. And I'm going to put a 0 here as a placeholder. So we end up with 70%. Another way to look at this is 35 over 50. We can think, well, we want our percentages to be out of 100 because we always write our percentage over 100. So what number could I multiply by 50 to get 100? And that number would be 2. 50 times 2 is 100. So I could do the same thing to the numerator. 35 times 2 is 70. So we still end up with the same answer. So if you got a 35 out of 50 on a test, your grade would be a 70%. Looking at the next one, we have 12 over 15. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my fraction or my division. I've got my 12 here and my 15 here. 15 can't go into 12, so I'm going to add a decimal and a 0. Now 15 can go into 120 8 times. It actually goes in nicely. 15 times 8 is 120. When I subtract, I get 0. So we have 8/10 as our decimal. And to change that into a percentage, I just move the decimal 2 times to the right, add a 0, and now I've got 80%. So if you got a 12 out of 15, your grade would be an 80%. And that kind of makes sense because 12 is more than half of 15, so your grade should be reflecting more than 50%. Here we have 7/8, so I know this is going to be a high score because I only missed 1 out of the 8 questions. So I'm going to put my 7 here, my 8 here. 8 can't go into 7. Going to add a decimal and a 0. 8 can go into 70 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. When I subtract 70 minus 64, I end up with 6. 8 can't go into 6, so I'm going to add a 0 to keep the division alive. 8 can go into 67 times. 8 times 7 is 56. When I subtract, I get 4. I think if I add one more 0 and bring that down, I'll probably end up with a 0 for a remainder because 8 can go into 40 5 times. 8 times 5 is 40. When I subtract, I get 0. So we have 0.875. We still want to move that decimal 2 times to the right, only 2 times. 1, 2. And when I do, I end up with 87.5%. And you can have a decimal in your percentage, so that works. If they ask you to round, then it would be 88%. For our last one, we've got 1/5. Now, 1/5 should be one of those benchmarks that you know, but if you don't, we can set up our fraction. 5 can't go into 1, add a decimal and a 0. 5 can go into 10 2 times. 5 times 2 is 10. When I subtract, I get 0. So that would be 2/10. Now I want to move my decimal 2 times to the right. When I do, I end up with 20%. So if you only got one question right out of 5 questions, your grade would be a 20%. And that makes sense because each question would be worth 20 points, so to speak. So ladies and gentlemen, that's how you convert a fraction to a percentage. You want to change it into a decimal, and then from there, move that decimal 2 times to the right, and then that will give you your percentage.